So there's a lot on the page. We can't go over everything in detail. Yeah. So let's just try to think about simplifying the argument. Again, debate is not about like science. It's a bit of opinion. So what I think make a good argument may differ a little bit from what Jeff thinks make a good argument. But overall, there are like a few common themes that comes up. I think the first thing is you want to make your argument quite clear. So when you come to the judge and you say, my argument is about the economy, the judge is like, that's good, I suppose. What about the economy? Right? Or if you say, my argument is about feminism, and the judge is like, I can see your passion, but what about it? Right? So I think a very quick tip is when you label your argument, try to already give your argument a conclusion or a direction so the judge knows where it's going. A good way to test this is the judge needs to almost see the conclusion first and then you explain later, right? So for example, that motion about banning for-profit universities and colleges, right? If you say, my argument is about fairness, I might be like, oh, I can kind of see where it's going, but I'm still not sure, right? But if you say, my first argument is how banning for-profit universities leads to a more equal society, I'm like, oh, I see that's what you're going to prove, right? So if I can see what you're going to try and prove, I can see the goal, and it's quite clear to me. I might not know how you're going to prove it, but I can see what you're trying to prove. Then that's a good argument, right? Because I, as a judge, I go, okay, I see what you're going to try and do. Now I'm intrigued. Tell me more, right? Um, so a lot of people think of debate as like maths. You do 1 + 1 = 2. You do the process first, and you show me the outcome. In debate, it's a bit of the other way around. You want to show me the outcome first, or like the big conclusion or the big theme, and then you tell me how you're going to prove it. That makes it a little bit easier for judge to follow your speech. That's number one. Number two is the analysis, right? So you said this is my argument. Now you have to actually go into the analysis. There's a few tips. They're all a little bit different. One is try and make clear what you're assuming to be true as part of that analysis, right? So a lot of people like would start their argument with something like, and I see this quite a lot, like you try to convince the judge, we all know X, right? And for example, I've once seen a debater in the motion, this house will ban school uniforms, right? Why do we want to ban school uniforms? The first argument was about, enforcement, right? Like it's very hard to enforce people to wear school uniforms the right way. People deviate, they wear, watches and then they wear shoes and they still try to stand out in some other ways anyways. Okay, not the strongest and most important argument, but fine, right? The start of that argument, this kid came up and was like, we all know students just don't follow rules anyways. And I'm like, that's a very big assumption, right? So like the first thing you want to do is to make sure the foundation that you're building your argument on isn't just kind of random assertion. And sometimes just because you say it confidently and you add the words and the phrases we all know, or obviously or naturally, doesn't mean it's right. Yeah. So you want to make sure the premise you're building it on is quite solid, right? Because the argument is going to be contentious anyways. The more you can build it up in a structured way, and each step feels like a reasonable step from the one before to get to your conclusion, the better. So start from like a reasonable place first. Don't start from like an assumption from the get-go. Start from a reasonable place at the start of your argument. Second thing, a lot of debaters are tempted to do one of two things. One is they overcommit. They try to prove that 100% correct 100% of the time. And if you can do that, that is amazing. That's beautiful, right? But I'll be honest with you, sometimes your argument is a bit stronger if you're reasonable, right? We don't need to show you that this is 100% of the time, 100% of this will happen. But come on, let's be reasonable. 90% of the time, students will do this, right? And these are the reasons why. When you force yourself to start thinking less in absolutes and more in terms of what could sound reasonable but still win you the argument, it's actually much better for the judge. So start thinking from the aspect of how do you show the possibility or likelihood of you being right is really quite high rather than being absolutely right all the time. Does that make sense? Right? So I said debaters are likely to do one of two things. The first thing is they try to claim they're right all the time, and they spend their time trying to defend the opposition, nitpicking tiny things, right? Like, no, that's not true. And sometimes you can just drop it. Okay, fine. if the parents really do this, if the students really do this, our arguments don't apply. But let's be honest, that's not the case most of the time, right? You can drop some things and still win the arguments. So first mistake debaters like to make, on top of shaky premise, is to be very absolutist in their outcome when they don't actually have to be, and they can still win an argument. The second problem, and I also see this a lot, is when they feel like they don't want to commit, and this is mostly linguistic, they would try to make the outcome super vague. Like, so maybe it would lead to people killing themselves. And I'm like, whoa, okay, that's a pretty big harm, but like, you also don't sound super committed to it. I'm not saying you need to prove certain things leads to people harming themselves. That's a pretty dark argument, right? It's also a bit strange to assume we would talk about that in like a debate. But also, if you're really gonna argue that, don't be like, and then this maybe happen or this can happen. So try to listen to your opposition's language. A lot of times, especially in Taiwan, we're kind of like polite and moderate by nature. So a lot of times we say, so if you do this, maybe people will feel offended or people can feel offended. And I'm like, people can or they cannot, right? So they might feel offended or they might not. So people overcommit and try to be absolute, or they undercommit. And their language and their arguments is all about this may happen, this can happen. Some people will, right? You actually want to find a sweet spot where you show the systematic incentives or drivers or the structural or circumstantial evidence point towards your argument is being right most of the time, right? You don't need to be absolute and you don't need to be 100% open-ended and just say, we don't want to do this because people might get offended and people might be sad, right? You need to be in a sweet spot. Does that make sense? Yeah? Um, Final thing on arguments. If you want to say X leads to Y, I know this is a bit abstract. You can find more than one way where X leads to Y. So your explanation that if you do this, then this will happen. The Y in the middle, you can find more than one Y, right? And I kept trying to tell debater this. You don't just need to have one pathway for how your argument happen. So if you say, this is gonna make students happier, don't just give me one pathway for why they would be happier. Give me more than one, right? Because if you have one way of getting to the same outcome, it's harder for opt to disprove all of them. Okay? So X leads to Y through path A. Even if you don't believe that, X also leads to Y through path B. Yeah, I'm simplifying it. It sounds a bit abstract. When you look at an argument, just ask, is there more than one way I can get to the same outcome on my side? Right? So that's also analysis. Is this all good? Yeah? Final thing is to explain the impacts. Once you have a good argument, you want to explain, once you have good reasoning, you want to explain the conclusion. So this leads to something. You have to explain why the thing it leads to is something I should care about. So for example, let's try again. This house will ban school uniform. We're gonna ban school uniform because school uniform deprives students of the freedom of expression, right? And you can give me many reasonable, logical explanations why school uniform actually does deprive students of the freedom of expression. Then there's a second question. Why should I care about freedom of expression? Right? Why can't I just say, I don't care. You're right, it deprives them of freedom of expression. I completely agree with you with your logic that it deprives them of freedom of expression, but I just don't think that's an important impact, right? Why should we care about students' freedom of expression? They're in school to learn. Screw their freedom of expression. I don't give a crap, right? So sometimes just proving something is true doesn't mean you proved it's important. So you have to think about the impact. The impact is just another way of saying, how is this important? Okay? In some arguments, it's more important to prove that it's true because the impact people will agree on, your other team will agree on. In some arguments, it's more important to prove the impact is important, right? In some arguments, you have to prove both. This is a judgment. When you're running your arguments, think about, am I trying to prove this thing is true? Or am I trying to prove this thing, if it's true, is important? Or am I trying to do both, right? And then you need to adjust your focus accordingly. Okay? And this is a common mistake that even very advanced debaters do, right? They're like, it's super important we do this because then the economy will grow. Okay, guys, almost nobody in the world thinks economy growing is a bad thing. Start don't spend your time telling me why the economy growing is good. Spend your time telling me why your model is going to lead to the economy growing. That's a more contentious part, right? Whereas in other places, people go like, and we do this because if we do this, then people will be happy. This is actually a bit controversial, but people being happy is not always an important impact. Yeah? If I go around giving everyone gummies and drugs, you might be happy, right? So, you have to think a little bit about the debate you're in. Sometimes it's more important to prove it's true. Sometimes it's more important to prove the impact you have is important. Sometimes it's both. Okay? Final thing on rebuttals, and then we're gonna go into a little bit of, I want to try and give you examples. This is why I talk a lot. So it's really important you try to write the examples because they might be helpful. Okay? There's a lot of different ways of giving responses, and there's a lot of text on this page. So just try to listen, and like different coaches classify responses differently. It's not law, it's just ideas you can have in your head when you think about how do I respond to something, right? So earlier we have questions from, was it Susie? Like, how do I respond to this? How do I respond to that? If you have a toolkit, you can just check through, can I respond it this way or can I respond this way? It might help, yeah? So the first way you can respond to something is just basically say that's not true, right? You're refuting their logic, right? It's not true, your premise is not true, X does not lead to Y, X leading to Y is very low probability. This is what everyone understands intuitively. When you want to argue with someone, you just say that's not true, correct? The thing that you're saying is not true and you try to disprove it. That's the top left-hand side. You refute the logic. I think everyone understands this is one path and it's just different how you do it depending on the argument and emotion. But there are other ways to respond to stuff as well, right? You can just say that is not true, but you can do other things. The second one, the bottom left-hand one, is you say it's true, but the impact you have is not that important. So again, this is like doing the other part. If an argument is not true, that's bad. If an argument is true, but the impact is not important, it's also bad, right? So the other thing you can do is just try to say the impact is not important or mitigate the impact, right? So, for example, school uniforms deprive students of the freedom of expression. One, true, it deprives them of students of the freedom of expression, but we don't think freedom of expression is that important on side opposition, right? And even if it was important, we don't think a lot of students actually care that much. Like it might be only important to some students. Actually, a lot of students care about the grades. They care about going to school and getting shit done. They care about when they're going to go to university. They care about their future career. They care about making friends and making parents happy. So even if there are a few students who care about freedom of expression, and you're right, banning uniforms will make them feel like they can express it better, it's not even something that a lot of students care about in the first place. So you're mitigating the benefits of the impact. Correct? Yeah? So just disagree with the logic or disagree with the impact or limit the impact, right? These are the two strategies, okay? The third strategy is you can sort of try to agree with them, but you sort of reinterpret the argument so the argument is no longer true. Let me give you an example. And I love using this example. I think all the coaches have heard me use this example 500 times because the first time I heard this came from a 12-year-old who has done like 3 months of debating. And this is why sometimes you think if you're less experienced in debating, you have a disadvantage. You don't, because your mind is open, right? And if you learn the principles of how to think in a critical way, you might be able to beat teams who have gotten into a habit of how they debate, right? And don't think very critically. So don't take your inexperience as a disadvantage, right? It's more about who can think better. So very simple motion. This house will ban school uniform. Okay? The government side came up and say, we want to ban school uniform because school uniforms deprive people of the ability to express their identity, right? If you can't wear the clothes you want to school, you can't really express yourself. Opposition asks a POI. POI, government says yes. Why is it so important that people can express themselves and express their identity? Government then responded in the same speech. Was really important because that's how people know who you really are. Your freedom of expression, your identity is really important because it allows people to know who you really are, right? Okay, this is all very predictable so far, right? Now, a deputy leader of opposition went up and gave a rebuttal that I've literally never heard before up to that point. And I think I was coaching for 6, 7 years at that point. And he's like a 12-year-old boy, right? He just went up and say, okay, I think it's really important people know who you are and you're expressing so people know your identity. But I disagree that banning school uniform will let you do that. Let's think about what happens when you ban school uniform. Some people will wear better clothes. Some people will wear worse clothes. Some people will dress in a goth way, and some people will dress in like a skateboarder way. When people see you dress that way, they are going to make assumptions about you because you look different, right? They're gonna say you're spoiled because you're rich, or you're lazy because your parents are poor, or you must just like sports and you must not be very clever because you dress like a jock. So in the context of schools, if you really want to be able to express who you are, it's better not to dress differently because people make assumptions about you. If everyone wears school uniform, people are more likely to judge you less on what you look like and more on what you say and how you behave, right? So if we really want students to be able to express themselves and their identity, it's much better to have uniforms. And I was like, holy shit, that was good, right? But what did he do? Did he disagree with the logic? A bit, right? Did he disagree with the impact? Not really. What was he trying to do? This kid, what he was trying to do is to say, let me reconstruct your argument. If you really care about expression, if you really care about identity, actually not having uniforms is better, right? And it was such a good response, right? He obviously won that round because he just came up with a very, actually at that time, not very common argument that people run, right? I've seen this debate motion over and over again. It's like an introductory debate motion. And that was the first time I actually see someone break it down that clearly, like that strategy, which is I'm not really disagreeing with your logic directly. I'm not really disagreeing with your impact. I'm just trying to reconstruct how you would get to the impact that you want. Does this make sense? Right? So sometimes if the government or the other team wants freedom of expression, tell me you get freedom of expression better, right? Redefine what freedom of expression really means. Freedom of expression is not the right to wear whatever you want. It's the ability for people to see you who you really are. And sometimes with children, wearing whatever you want actually doesn't allow people to see you for who you really are, right? That's like a very good flip, right? Does everyone see that? Yeah? Yeah? It's like random 12-year-old who hasn't done much debating at that point. He was just a very good thinker, right? And he realized he doesn't have to disagree entirely with everything the government is saying to win that argument. He can just reconstruct it. Okay? The very last example, and for some reason, a lot of Taiwanese kids like to do this, right? Is you just try to make sure you get the benefit on both sides. And this is a little bit different from the one before. You just say, you want freedom of expression, we get freedom of expression too, through some other way. You want discipline, we get discipline too, through some other ways, right? So a good example is opposition might say, we want uniform because uniform gives us discipline. Government can say, yeah, discipline is important. Yeah, you get discipline. Yeah, we agree with discipline. But the thing is, we can have discipline too. It's symmetric on both sides, right? If students misbehave, we'll still punish them. So discipline is symmetric. We co-opt discipline. We have your impact. We have your argument because we have it too, right? That's a way to respond. You don't have to disagree with them. You're just saying we have it too. And in that way it becomes, equal, at least on that issue on both sides. You need to be careful how you do this though. Yeah, because a lot of people just like to say, this is symmetric, and the whole debate is symmetric. And at the end of the day, the judge is like, if everything is symmetric, then who wins, right? So you have to be careful about doing this. It sounds very convenient, but you have to be careful. Okay, does this all make sense? Yeah? So we're gonna do an exercise where I'm gonna pick coaches, probably Jeff and Enzo, because they did the homework. They're gonna give you an argument. They'll tell you what the motion is. They give you an argument. And then everyone here together, individually, when you are listening, sorry, Enzo is messaging me. What are you doing, Enzo? You're distracting me. By the way, I really want to emphasize, yeah, debate is a very cool sport, right? It's not like you're coming in, like, if you want to compete in basketball, you need to have like the physical condition and like you have to shoot 100 hoops in the morning, maybe more than that, 100 hoops after school. Debate, yes, you need the skill, right? You need to be able to speak fluently. You need to be able to analyze debate well. The more you debate, the better you get at it. But sometimes people who are a bit newer to the sport or the activity can have an advantage because they think clearly. So there's so many factors that goes into what makes a good debater, what makes a good speech, right? So the idea of being able to think clearly and constructively and not be modeled and being able to try new things, yeah, this is equal. Everyone can access that, okay? So people who are more experienced in debate will have an advantage over you, but everyone has ability to just access ideas, right? It's just in your brain. You don't need permission, you don't need something else, you don't need the internet, right? Everyone can do that. So that's like one of the really cool thing about debating. Yeah, it's very egalitarian if you think about it. Anyways, I forgot what I was saying because Enzo like messaged me something confusing. So the coaches are gonna give you a motion. They're gonna give an argument, not the whole speech, just one argument. What I want everyone to do individually when you're listening is to think about how you will respond to that argument and also give another argument of yours. So we might randomly pick someone, we might do it together. I'm not gonna tell you, but I might randomly pick anyone on this call in the room. And the reason I say that is because I want all of you to be on your edge and ready because you can be picked. Okay? Everything makes sense? Yeah? Before we go into the drill, any questions? All the questions so far have been amazing, by the way. Dylan had questions. Susie had questions. Yeah? Any questions in the room? He helicopter Jeff Chai? No? Everyone dead in the room? Okay, cool. All right, so hopefully this is helpful. Jeff is gonna go first. I'm not gonna share my notes on the screen with you because then you might not take your own. So please take notes, okay? Jeff, do you wanna share your motion first?
Oh, yes. I'll type it down and then I'll read it out while I'm typing. The motion
Okay,
is
cool.
this house would require, this house would make marital, shit, I cannot spell. Nailed it.
Nailed it.
Agreement mandatory.
Does anyone not know what premarital agreements are? Yeah, so sometimes, so Dylan raised his hand. Good question, right? So by the way, when you are in a debate tournament, if you see a motion and you don't know a certain word, like you literally, you're not asking for arguments, you just don't know a word. Yeah, you can ask the chief adjudication panel, the people who make the motions. After the motion is released, you can ask, can I have a motion clarification? I'm telling you this now because at TSDC, that would be me and Jonathan and like two of our friends from the very, very extremely competitive Filipino circuit, right? So if you see a motion and you go like, I don't even know how to debate this, not because I don't know have the arguments, I just don't even know what the word means, you're allowed to ask, okay? So a premarital agreement is an agreement that adults sign before they enter a marriage, right? So before they enter a marriage, they might have some conditions that is written to a premarital agreement. A premarital agreement is between two individuals. It doesn't involve the government, right? It's the condition of their marriage that two individuals sign, right? So it's not the same as, you know, if I and my partner go to the government office and then like sign papers to show the government that we're married, right? It's between two people. It's outside the scope of the government's institution of marriage. It's just an agreement between two people. Okay. And then there's usually some conditions to it that people like to talk about, which I guess Jeff will explain. But Jeff, maybe a little bit of definition before you start. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Let's say I aim to make 4 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Perfectly fine.
Okay. Right. Does everyone know what you're supposed to be doing right now? Yeah, and afterwards, what do you do?
One
Great.
rebuttal, one argument. Yeah, good. Okay.
That means you too. Get ready. Where's your pen? Your pen feels very useless today. Yes. All right. Love is very blind. We see most of people when they get married, they got very awkward to demand the other person of certain things because they feel it's gonna ruin the romance. It's gonna ruin the sexy excitement of living together. When you start making things like a contractual obligation, it kind of make it quite ugly, right? Because it feel like you're making a business deal with the other person. But in reality is marriage a lot of time is about making business deal because you're making sacrifices. You have to make trade-off. You have to set up time to pick up kids. You have to decide who's gonna do chores. And there has to be some sort of internal order within. But when people don't actually openly talk about it and they kind of just leave it to whatever happens later and we will deal with it, the kind of mentality, usually that's when the chaos pursues. Right. So what we're going to talk about is why having a premarital agreement creates more stability and equality within a family. So what it's going to look like is that we're going to have maybe some sort of standard issue version of the contract that is applicable for most of people. Just like when you want to have a rental agreement with your landlord, there's a standard issue they can apply for most of people. It's going to have the requirements of who is going to pay for repair, what's going to happen with damaged property, how much it's going to be for the deposit, for example, right? And on top of these basic things, you can make modification for yourself. There's going to be room for lawyers to negotiate on both sides. They're going to be mandated. There's going to be a mandated period where both parties need to come to an agreement on what kind of terms and agreement they have to make with each other. And they're going to have lawyers present at all times. That's going to be legally required, right? To have a third party to witness the whole process and so on. So what this also means is that we make sure that people are not able to take advantage in the process because even if a really shitty lawyer, right, they're probably going to be much better than you negotiating against your partner on your own because that is going to be much more private and much more vulnerable to exploitation and emotional abuse as a result. So we think that even if this is very uncomfortable, over time, this will be normalized into something that people just kind of get used to and they don't think of bringing up agreements and negotiation as something that's very ugly. They're more likely to go into just see this as a necessary part of figuring out their marriage life. And marriage life is very different from just dating, right? It's going to have other social responsibilities as well. That's why the government needs to be part of this and not just let people decide on their own because the breakup of marriage dispute is going to involve things like kids getting abandoned and then family property being settled in a very horrific ways and nobody knows how much they owe to each other. Those are the social damage you can avoid on outside of the house. So we also think that this is going to be a good mechanism to minimize the damage when people inevitably break up. There is roughly 40% of a chance that any given couple is going to break up. That pretty high percentage chance is going to create a lot of logistic difficulties and then financial difficulties and even legal barriers as well. When the court is clogged with all of this divorce lawsuit, it means that the court cannot process anything else. We minimize the damage done to other innocent third parties who doesn't want to be part of this whole mess. The last thing we want to talk about is how it empowers the people to negotiate. We think a lot of times, especially women or poorer individuals in a marriage kind of find it difficult to stand up to their partner. Also because they might not be aware certain things is bad for them. Like they just think that it's okay, I take out trash every single day. And the other person doesn't do anything, not even do dishes once in a while. It's just normal to be a woman, right? But we think that with the lawyer's presence and with a better awareness of being there, better awareness of what kind of agreement is being used by most of the people, we can have a greater discourse that help people make better decisions and not just being cheated in a relationship in the name of love. So for this reason, we have better quality, we help people make more informed decisions, and we protect people from unnecessary damages down the road when divorce inevitably happen for both.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to give everyone a bit of time. So let's say 4 minutes. So what I want you to do is just based on your notes, and it doesn't have to be perfect, right? A lot of people are scared of expressing their opinions or trying things in debate because they think it's not good enough, it's not perfect. you just want to make sure you don't get into that mindset in debating, right? Because it's a very hard activity. So like we say, don't let perfection be the enemy of good, right? Just because you're not perfect yet doesn't mean you shouldn't try and you shouldn't express what you have. So let's take 4 minutes. What I want you guys to all do individually is to think about, okay, how can I respond to that? So Jeff given us a little bit of a setup in that he talked about the context for why this is sort of important, how it's likely going to happen without these premarital agreements. People are a bit reluctant to negotiate because they don't want to ruin the romance, or they don't negotiate because they don't know how, and they might think everything they're facing is normal, right? If you're the less powerful partner, if you're poorer, or if you're a woman, you just suck up to everything that you've been given because you don't know better. He's given a model, right? A standard contract, etc., lawyers, right? And he's providing an argument, right? Which I'm not going to repeat because you should know. Yeah. So 4 minutes. I want you to come up with responses. You can have more than one, and one argument on the other side why you don't want premarital agreement, or not really, why you don't want to make premarital agreements mandatory, right? The motion is making premarital agreements mandatory. So responses and argument, 4 minutes, yeah? So I'm just gonna mute myself. We're gonna start the time now.
Yeah, could be decided by individual.
So if I decide, like, if it has to go to the other, and then
You can decide for yourself.
Okay. Also some good questions. Good one, Chami. Put in the chat there. Yeah. So I wonder, before we start, if you're having difficulty coming up with responses of arguments, we can reverse engineer, right? What difficulties or what questions are you having, and why do you think that makes it a bit difficult to find arguments, right? Anyone have like questions that came to mind when they're trying to do this exercise? Please share. Any questions? Any concerns? You were like, oh my God, how do I do this? What made this difficult? Anyone want to share? If not, I'm gonna pick on people. So if nothing is difficult, then you're gonna give me an amazing response and argument, right? Something has to give, yeah? Either you found it difficult, in which case you can explain why, or you didn't find it difficult, in which case, if I pick you, your response and argument is like mind-blowingly awesome. See, I'm a debate coach. I know how to get you to like admit that you made a logical flaw there. So what do you prefer? Do you prefer telling me why it's difficult, or do you prefer committing to a mind-blowingly awesome rebuttal and argument?
Wait.
Did someone say something in the room, or?
I was telling
All
them
right.
commit.
Commit. Okay. I'm just gonna randomly pick someone. I'm sorry for people on the call because you're the ones I can see. Catherine. Hey, buddy. Anything you find difficult, or do you just want to share your rebuttal and argument? Either way.
yeah, rebuttal argument.
Okay. You might have to speak a little louder because you're just a bit hard to hear.
Okay.
Can you say something now again? I still can't really hear you.
My rebuttal would be that making argument mandatory makes it seem like these couples, they don't trust each other, and it's just like foreshadowing that their relationship is not going to work out. And then it makes them question about if their relationship is going to work. And these people, they might be pressurized to sign these agreements, as they see that now it makes it legal and that you agree to it and then you can't change it again. So these people, other people might be forced to sign it, and they also might face like financial problems. Like if one person has more money than the other, but they don't have equal access to the resources, then it's going to be hard if they have a divorce and experience financial difficulties. And for some people, such as different religions, it might be seen as a bad thing for signing this argument.
Yeah, go on.
So by forcing these people to sign these agreements and making them mandatory, it might actually create less stability in their relationships.
Good. Okay. So what you've done there is, I think you actually have like 2 or 3 different points. Because you have one point about how this might make the couples feel like they don't trust each other. You have a point about how this might go against some people's religion, right? Which I think is different, right? They're different points, so I wouldn't say they're the same argument. And then you have a point in the middle, which I'm not sure if I captured it correctly, which was something about money and like if it might be. So can you explain that point in the middle?
They might face financial problems, like if one partner has more money than the other, so they don't have like equal resources to use.
Okay, so you're saying if at the point of signing the agreement, if they have different financial status, one partner's lawyer might be better than the other partner's lawyer? Is that what you're saying? It's a bit vague. Yeah?
Like if divorce, they face financial difficulties.
If they face financial difficulty.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the point. So later on in the relationship, if they face financial difficulty,
If they
how does
divorce,
that?
face financial difficulty.
Okay, I'm not 100% sure I understand the logical impact, but that's fine. Where's the rebuttal though? Right? Because I think you went into your argument really quickly.
Mm.
I think this is a good example of there's some parts of your arguments that maybe sounds intuitively rebutting what Jeff is saying, right? Especially the way you ended on the conclusion that it might not bring stability. But I think we all, like in this example, still need to address like Jeff's argument and like his premise before going on to an argument, right? So this is the difficulty, because if I agree with you that, okay, maybe this model creates a sense of distrust, I can agree with you, but also still agree with Jeff's argument that it could still help society because it prevents like extremely messy divorces in the future. It can still help society because it gives women and poorer people in that couple a starting point because it's mandated and they're incentivized to negotiate, right? So the difficult thing is if you don't respond directly, the judge can agree with your argument, but technically also agree with the government's argument, and therefore there is a bit of subjectivity. The judge has to decide which of these arguments is more important, right? Does anyone have like a direct response to Jeff's argument, by the way? It's not easy, I know. Yeah.
So can I offer like a modification on Catherine's argument so that
Yeah, that'll be good.
it make more like a rebuttal. All right. So I think what Catherine is trying to get to is that she's kind of imagining the agreement is going to be bad. That's why when you cannot change it, it's bad for the couple who are staying in it. So if you notice one of the things that governments are saying right now, they are trying to say there's gonna be equal bargaining power between both couples, right? Between the two person in a couple. And because of equal bargaining power means that necessarily the agreement will be a reasonable list of things that the people have to do. If you can destroy that premise and say there's not really equality within that negotiation, therefore the agreement you're going to make is going to be unfair. And that unfairness is going to persist throughout the entire marriage. Once you already sign up to it, then it's going to be bad, right? So as opposed to just assume it's going to be bad, and we oppose the agreement, you need to give a systematic reasons why the agreement is likely going to be bad. And then it's going to be a lifetime problem if you force people to commit to it throughout the entire marriage. Right? So you can think about what are the reasons that makes the agreement bad.
Thank you.
Good. Jeff, do you want to pick someone in a room to try a response and an argument? Because we have someone online.
Yeah, Marcus.
All right, so
Marcus,
would you be able to come a
here.
little closer? Thank you, Marcus.
all right, so I have two responses.
Good job.
First is regarding your claim that it makes this mandatory premarital agreement sort of make sure people would not be treated poorly. But as I believe the previous person said, it amplifies the imbalance of power, because let's think of this situation. For example, there's a poor person marrying a rich person. Well, now this poor person, he's so poor that he can't even afford a lawyer. Well, then it's not it's not this person against that person. It's this person against that person against this lawyer. And even worse, the agreements themselves is sort of mandatory by law. So there's no way of escaping it. Once you sign it, you can't just leave because that's mandatory by law. And he also talked about how this premarital agreement sort of by the end of it avoid chaos for divorce. But I believe there's something more important than divorce, which is marriage, right? And this is my point, which it discourages marriage. And there are a few points why that's true. Because when people keep proposing stuff that the other person must do, then more people might not be interested in marriage because other people are demanding stuff from them. And more importantly, marriage isn't about negotiating with your partner. It's about cooperating and getting something done together, right? And adding on to that, an extra step adding on to the already complex and time-consuming process of marriage would sort of discourage a lot of couples from being married. So based on all that, I think we should not make it mandatory.
Great. Coaches, I'm just going to drink some water. If you want to start with feedback, please jump in. Jeff, Enzo, thoughts?
I jump in for feedback. Enzo, you want to go first? Or I can go first. All right.
I think Jeff can go first.
Okay. So, Marcus, I think the first point was right. There's a power imbalance, but I'm still not very sure where exactly is the power imbalance. Why is it so difficult to mitigate? Because government side, right now, you say you have lawyers present and you have a third party to witness the whole process, like some sort of notarizer. And if that's the case, why is this imbalance of power still something that's very difficult to overcome? Right? So give me a few more analysis. It's in the right direction, right? It's definitely the things that I will bring on opposite side, but it's not enough specification to demonstrate how bad it is. Second, that something being mandatory by law and people cannot leave is a good characterization of what the contract is, but it needs to be based on the contract being bad first. If it's something good, you cannot leave and you just enjoy it, right? So you need to think about why you're making a claim. And what makes this claim good is not that you cannot leave, right? It's that the agreement is bad. So you still need to spend more time to explain what makes an agreement bad first. Right? Number three, I think the ideas of people not getting married because marriage contract becomes very demanding. Number one, it still is a premise on the idea of contract being bad and demanding. So, but secondly, I think the ideas of like next people getting married doesn't sound intuitively that bad. Right? At least to me, it doesn't feel like something that is so damaging to society that is definitely worse off than people having property disputes or having a
Jeff, can I just jump in there? This is a very good example of you want to think a little bit about, am I trying to prove something is true or am I trying to prove something is important, right? And I guess on average, if you add more things people have to do before they get married, and if these things may involve a slightly, at best, laborer's task and at worst very complicated and potentially a little bit scary, then the logical conclusion that you have that it may, and again, I think it's good that you were not absolutist but not super open-ended either, right? We'll talk about finding that sweet spot, right? It is likely for some people that marriage is less attractive, right? I think that logic, the truthfulness of that logic might be fine based on other than the fact that Jeff pointed out that it's based on the premise that you still have to prove. Let's assume you prove that premise, then that logic is fine, right? But then here it becomes like, but is that important? And I know like everyone in this room might be like, wedding, marriage, Disney, happy ever after. But in a debate world, it might not be obvious, right? Because in a debate world, somebody who is really, really good, who debates for like, say, Team England or someone, or Team Taiwan, because we're good as well, right? Might just come up and be like, but why is even encouraging marriage a thing we care about? Like, we're in the 21st century, people can be happy, alone, married, divorced, whatever. So you're assuming that maintaining rates of marriage is good, and you're assuming anything that deters marriage is bad. But why, right? So back to our argument. That one is where, even if it's true, it's still really important to explain why it's important, right? Keep coming back to this, true and important, right? You ideally want to prove both, and you need to figure out how to allocate your time. Yeah, does that make sense, Marcus? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I was gonna say, if you really want to prove marriage is important, right? Just commit to it. I say marriage provides stability to people's mental health. Marriage provides population to future economic growth. Marriage gives you some sort of financial package. Right? You are combining resources of two families as opposed to people being on their own. You are reducing the possible ways that someone's life can go completely wrong and with nobody else to help them, something like that, right? And don't just leave it like marriage is going to be reduced, right? Because then I cannot really compare. Why is that more important than whatever the harm the other side is saying? All right, Enzo, don't be polite. Go for it.
I see. So basically I'm going to be a parrot and just like say like stuff in similar ways to what already to have like what has already been said. But I think yeah, broadly, I remember like when listening to a speech, there's the part about making the already complex part of marriage even more complex. I suppose the problem I thought is like if I was going to attack that, I'd say, yeah, but then it's already like very busy. So and like a very complicated procedure. So it's unclear why this necessarily is going to be the the like the tipping point
It's
for
not that complicated though, right? If we have to be
yes,
honest. You just show up at the government office and sign papers. It's more like the Chinese culture of wanting to invite 500 people to your marriage,
yeah.
which is not actually mandatory. That's more complicated, but
I mean, at
yeah.
least the social part is very complex, like
Yes.
the weddings, finding each other's parents. Okay, anyway, that whole long list of stuff. But I suppose, yeah, I guess it's proving like, and I think Jeff has already mentioned it's like, why is, making marriage an easier process in itself relatively important? Because I think that's currently the main direction up could and would be nice to take. And I suppose, yeah, it's why that is so like valuable because currently on Gov, the drive that they or at least the push they have on you is they say, oh yeah, the whole long list of things, right? Having if people do get divorced, not settling assets is a big problem. And just like generally dispute after people have already opted into like marriage is a relatively big issue. So I think somebody's saying it's a bit inconvenient here. It's not enough to like like how should I put it? Like outcompete say the impact that the government's trying to run. I suppose it's the putting in like a few reasons why necessarily the things just proving are so important and so vital. So I suppose that's what Jeff said. Like marriage for the country and for the economy, or like for example, this I'm not sure whether or not this would fly, but like ideas about like the other benefits that marriage can have for a person, like maybe why having this contract could end up making life worse, like in a significant way for some people. And yeah, that's just broadly in that direction.
We're gonna do another trial run of the same drill. By the way, and I think I want to emphasize this as a whole, like why debate is actually quite egalitarian in some way, because some of you may struggle to come up with rebuttals or arguments or strengthening it. just before we do the next drill, I just want to give a very important piece of advice. If you like debating, or you're like, this is something I want to try and get better at, you honestly don't even need to like go to as many competitions. You should go to all the competitions you can in Taiwan because they're so much more affordable and close. But you don't have to think, oh, because I'm not going to all these big, expensive international competitions, I'm going to fall behind. Because, you know, compared to when I started debating, you have so many tournaments online and you have so many videos of amazing speakers online. And one of the things that I used to do is I would listen to one speech and then I would pause it. And then before I listen to the next speech, I would go, what would I respond to that speech? Then I would then play the next speaker and see how they responded to the first speaker. And it's actually so simple. It takes a bit of time investment. If you're listening to two speeches, it's just like 15 minutes plus your own thinking, 5 minutes, 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, you're gonna do a drill. You're gonna listen to two good speakers if you look up like good videos, and you're gonna figure out how good debaters attack other good debaters, right? So you have so many resources at your disposal. So, you know, again, from that perspective, as long as you have internet, it's pretty egalitarian. There's so many free videos online. Let's go on to the next drill. But just before that, again, what we want to try and get you guys to do is get into the mindset of, one, let me respond to that argument directly. And then two, let me have my own arguments, right? So that was two good attempts as well, right? Let's just make sure that you really focus on, first, your mindset shouldn't be, let me do what I have already prepared. You should be, first, let me respond. And then secondly, let me like find my argument. Yeah. So Enzo, would you mind sending the motion of the wording of the motion that you're going to be doing now in the chat? And if you're gonna start immediately, we can just give people more time between to do both a response and argument. Yeah. Okay, so a pretty long one. Just gonna give everyone a bit of time to digest before Enzo starts. And Enzo, just speak slowly, okay? Because like, let's make sure people get it. 1 second.
Just to comment, do I do setup too, or just cutting straight into the argument?
I think do the setup as well, because I think for this
see.
one, it might actually be interesting for people to hear the setup. The way like Jeff also did the setup, like it's gonna be a standard contract, lawyers will be mandatory on both sides, and you have a limited time to negotiate, and after that it would the process would, like, I guess, reset. So yeah, I think let's do the setup all the way up to the first argument. Okay, so everyone understand what we're gonna do? You're gonna listen to the speech, then you're gonna have a few minutes to brainstorm a response and an argument from the opposition side. Enzo is gonna do prompt. All right, whenever you're ready, Enzo.
I see. So is it around, I mean, I'm just trying to make it around the same length as 4 minutes.
Just do whatever you have to do. It's fine.
I see. Okay. It is unfair that certain countries are able to enjoy prosperity by actively making life more difficult or directly destroying the livelihoods of others. Proud to propose. So going directly into the model and world building, this will probably look like, for example, taxing countries with extremely high carbon emissions. Just from like one singular metric can be out there to measure how the amount of carbon that countries necessarily emit. And this can look at, for example, within the companies overseas, within the even maybe factories that are registered in the country but produce overseas. And this can all, for example, be traced back, if it can all be traced back to one single corporation based in a certain country, that country could probably also take responsibility. But altogether, the idea is, after measuring which countries end up polluting the most in terms of carbon, in terms of like carbon dioxide, or in terms of just carbon emissions in general, ultimately these countries will probably have to pay a certain fee to an international organization, either maybe like overseen by the UN or another such organization that is able to have a degree of influence or control over individual countries' decisions. The upshot of this is this money will then be collected in the same way taxes would be from individuals or from companies into like a central fund, and then will probably be redistributed to, for example, countries worst affected by climate change, and especially based on their emission, and based on the amount that they emit within the atmosphere. So, for example, countries that emit very little carbon into the atmosphere will necessarily get greater degrees of benefits. As mentioned, of course, this will all be with respect to the population within the country and on an individual basis. So on net, the key idea here is countries which emit a lot of carbon will have to necessarily pay and fund countries which emit less for example, infrastructure plans. The key principle argument that I'll forward within the speech is that, of course, in the current status quo, it is quite unfair that countries have already industrialized can actively, make it more difficult for countries which are, for example, less industrialized or less wealthy to necessarily develop when they actively emit a large amount of carbon to the atmosphere. I mean, just through climate change and through extreme weather, the lower emitting countries, in many cases, especially the ones with the lowest emissions, tend to be correlated with countries with, for example, less wealth in general or less development in general. And it's generally harder for them to develop, especially if they're affected by seasonal floods or by extreme weather that comes as a result of the climate change from the wealthier countries, which have necessarily already gone through the industrialization process and are actively, for example, emitting other different greenhouse gases. So the natural upshot of this is there's a degree of inequality and unfairness that necessarily comes from the ability from these countries necessarily benefiting, but actively, as mentioned, taking opportunities away or making lives of the countries which are the lowest emitters more difficult. And putting a price on this pollution, putting a price on these emissions helps to, I mean, on a practical level, it probably helps to deter a degree of these emissions. But even if it does not, at least it provides the resources to necessarily cushion the damage of, for example, extreme weather and climate change on the lowest emitting countries. So I think ultimately, on a principle level, on a principle level in itself, irrespective of the practical outcome, irrespective of whether or not we lower emissions, we are more able to, for example, even out an international playing field by allowing countries that are generally, for example, less developed to start with, necessarily shield their citizens, shield their people from the worst effects of climate change, and hold the countries which are, for example, the most industrialized and the wealthiest to account.
Cool. Okay. Pause there and gonna give everyone 4 minutes to work on responses and one argument on opposition. So you disagree requiring high carbon emitting countries to compensate low carbon emitting countries. Yeah? All right, 4 minutes. Your time starts now. Okay, you have 2 more minutes. Okay, people, time. We'll come back. Same drill. Anything you find difficult, interesting that you would like to raise, share, get coaches to discuss? Anyone?
Oh, we could have POI? I didn't know. shit.
Nah, don't. Good, okay. So if no questions, I'm gonna randomly pick someone here. Sorry, I don't know any of you, so this is totally random. Let's try Chami. Oh, did you volunteer, Chami?
No, actually, I have a question.
You have a question, that's good as well. Fine.
So, Enzo said something about how the money collected will be from the individuals, from companies, but how, but it's hard to guarantee that the individuals are directly the source of carbon emissions. So it probably wouldn't make a lot of sense to do that since they don't hold a decision in those things very
And
much.
so this is a clarity point, yeah? Do you wanna? That's a very good question, Chami. Like, if that's like a point that we probably want to clarify, Enzo.
I see. I think, yeah, I hope it wasn't very clear with the way I structured everything, which made it yeah, with the way I structured things. But I think what I was trying to say, which I know I didn't deliver very well, was we would measure like emissions on an individual level within the country. So because countries in general come in, I want to say different shapes and sizes, but that sounds weird. But I guess the point is there's different population sizes in different countries. And of course, naturally speaking, larger countries tend to have more people and by default more carbon emissions. I guess the idea here is we will look at not just, for example, like countries that are hosting factories, but the countries that actively benefit of these factories and the individuals and calculate based on the, for example, head office of this company and look at generally these developed countries and look at per individual how much carbon they necessarily emit, like taking into account these the population
Can you
factor.
simplify that, Enzo? Just simplify that.
I see. So I guess it's just looking at carbon emissions like for different countries, but taking into account how many people that this country necessarily has to support in relation to their carbon footprint.
So very simply, China is going to have a lot of emissions, but China is a massive country. So under Enzo's definition, China wouldn't be the most high carbon emitting country because his metric would look at how many people are in those countries. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But it's good. So what do you do at TSDC when someone sets something up and you're not 100% sure you understand it, and then by the time you come up to speak, you're like, damn, I have to deal with this, but I'm not sure I completely get it. The key thing here is as you're listening to it and you already start to think it's unclear, this is why World School allows you to POI. Right?
Oh.
So as you're listening to his model and you start to go, wait, I'm not sure that's very clear, you should immediately stand up and try and POI, because sometimes it's in your interest to make sure the other team is clear. So you can then engage with it, right? So one thing you can do is try to POI. The other thing you can do is, as part of your response, say, look, it's not very clear what PM intends to say. I have two interpretations. It could mean this, or it could mean this. If it was this, here's how I would respond. If it was the other thing, then this is how I would respond. And it's okay. Sometimes judges understand it's not expressed clearly or you didn't hear it. If you're trying your best to engage, that's all you can do, right? But that's a very good example of if something wasn't super clear to you, how can you treat the situation, right? You can either try to POI immediately as you're jotting that down, or you can try to segment it into scenarios and address the scenario separately. Does that make sense? Yeah, Xiaomi? Yeah, Jeff, go on.
Yeah.
You have your hand up, sorry.
yeah, no problem. Oh, or we can make it like the whole country need to pay X amount of tax, but the people who are responsible for paying the amount is proportional to how much of their personal carbon footprint. Like, say, if you run a huge plastic factory, you're more responsible for a higher percentage of that tax. But if it's just some regular farmer, you're not as responsible for, so you pay less tax. So this would mean that the tax rates amongst each individual is still proportional to how much damage you make. So even though you as a person doesn't make as much damage, you living in a country are paying more taxes compared to someone else in your similar positions.
Cool. Okay. Bit of a complicated model, right? Just to get our heads around. And this is, hopefully you also start to see, like when you see emotion, you need, before you jump into arguments, a gut check and mentally work through, okay, how much details do I need on my model? How much setup do I need to do before I go into my arguments, right? And this is like coming back to the first point. Figuring that out, like what kind of debate is going to look like, is just as important as having good arguments, right? Okay, Jeff, would you like to pick someone in the room? I think we're running out of time very quickly, so we might have to be a little bit limited on actual feedback. We just want to give a chance to someone to try and respond.
Volunteer. If not,
I'm
gonna
Volun told them.
Henry. All right, come here. Even though you're already so close, I don't trust you. Literally come here.
So, countries in undeveloped countries such as those undeveloped ones in Africa, they may use the money that they received from the other high carbon emitting countries and use this money as an opportunity to improve. But
He said, proceed.
okay, so they may use it as an opportunity to improve, but in doing so, this may have not the intended effect, because when the the undeveloped countries improve, this may result in even more carbon emissions, because those by improving, they might purchase some more stuff like machineries, or they may build more factories, so this will increase more carbon emissions. And I propose that we should give funds to organizations that are dedicated to help with pollution, like greenhouse gas pollution, because they will make sure that the money they will make sure that the money will directly help with cleaning up our environment and ensuring the like life, ensuring the well-being of other people, and not let the government of the countries that receive the money do whatever they want with the money. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Good.
Alright.
Thank you. So because I think we're a little bit short on time, we have to let you off soon. I'll just comment quickly, and if any coaches want to jump in, let's do it. Otherwise, we'll let you guys go. Henry, I think you raised some really, really good points. My first recommendation would be to make it clearer what part of Jeff's speech you're responding to, instead of making it sound like just a general issue you want to raise, right? So for example, the point that you said, you know, if you give money to these developing countries, they could use the money for different things. For example, they can use the money to grow the economy, which subsequently just means that with economic growth, you're also likely to have higher emissions as well, right? I think that's a really good idea. I think what you need to do firstly is to make this sound more like a rebuttal. So you have to say which part of Jeff's speech is this a response to, right? Not Jeff, sorry, Enzo. Enzo's speech you're responding to. So for example, you can say, you know, the Prime Minister told us that this money would be used for compensation, but he didn't tell us exactly how that's going to happen or how you're going to enforce that. And this is problematic because then the money can lead to unintended or negative consequences. For example, and then run what you run. Does that make sense? Then it doesn't then sound like an overarching problem, but more like a specific issue you're raising and framing it as he didn't sufficiently explain how this is going to get used and how to enforce it, right? The second main idea that you have, which is trying to propose an alternative, I think is also quite good. What I would suggest that you do there is to abstract it out to a bigger issue, right? So the way it kind of comes across was a little bit like, why don't we do this instead, right? Why don't we give it to environmental organizations instead? And you did have reason for that. We don't want to leave the government to do whatever they want with the money. Okay, that's fine. The way to improve this is to not make it sound like you're kind of just raising random ideas. Like it's, you know, it shouldn't sound like someone goes, let's do McDonald's, and you go like, but why not KFC, right? It needs to be a little bit more like, what is the problem with what they're saying? So I will start almost backwards, right? If you want to propose an alternative, one of the first things you can do in debate is to say, there are better alternatives that the government side has not explained why they wouldn't consider, right? So why is the government side not considering, for example, just supporting environmental organizations? Why is the government side not considering, for example, setting stricter climate change targets? Because there are international climate change agreements, right? So if you're gonna go down the path of here alternatives, I would go all in and be like, the government said this is a solution, but they haven't explained why they can't consider all these other things that could be done. And some of that is being done already and can make it better. So if you're gonna say environmental organizations, just expand it. Why can't the government side have stricter climate change agreements, right? Why can't the government side just tax environmental organization? Some countries already have tax on carbon emitting industries. Why is that not enough, right? So if you're gonna go all in and make the government side look like they haven't considered a lot of alternatives. Does that make sense? Yeah? Cool. Any coaches want to jump in? If not, I'm sorry we're a bit short on time. As you can see, as I said at the beginning, it's impossible to cover everything in 3 hours, right? Hopefully this is a good sense of what you can get through debating. Anything else to say, coaches?
Yeah, I also feel that the conclusion of Africa shouldn't evolve and develop because they will make more carbon emission is a bit problematic, because that's kind of what governments I was saying from the beginning, right? That the big countries, they're able to industrialize earlier, and that limits opportunity for other countries to develop instead. So I think maybe you can tweak the model a little bit to say that instead of direct financial benefit, we support things like technological transfer or much more technical part of assistance, so that the money is not just given out to countries and we don't know what they do with it. It's that we are gonna make sure that the money is used to help countries that are struggling with green technologies to be able to afford a patent, to buy better machineries that are more fuel efficient, so that they can be greener as well. As opposed to, we don't want to get in the money because I'm afraid they're gonna produce too much, right? Because that sounds a bit negative. It's not substantively changing your case. It's just like the narrative you are kind of projecting. Give you a little bit more positive input if you say we're using this money to do other things that are much more environmentally friendly. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. All right. So before we go, I'm thinking we can all take a group picture at the end so that we can put it on social media to show that we successfully run the workshop and we're not, randomly just doing things.
So
Okay, so if you
put on your best look.
Yeah. So everyone, if you can turn on your camera, that would be great. And in-person people, can you all line up in the front? Try to line up around the TV so we can have both the screen. Dylan, don't do that. We can have the screen and the people all in one frame.
Also, is it Ariel and Ethan? It's kind of hard to see. Not Ariel and Ethan. Ariel and Eric, is it? It's kind of a bit hard. It's a bit hard to see you because I can just see your amazing foreheads, which is interesting, but ideally not just your foreheads. Oh, hi. I saw your face for the first time on this workshop. I just kept seeing your foreheads.
Right, go.
Also, can I ask, is Yoder International Academy a new school? I've never heard of Yoder before. Is it? Like, come on, tell me. There's so many Yoder on this chat. Is it a new school? Dylan, Ariel, Eric.
Hey guys, you want to go home? Huh? Oh, yeah.
Ariel, you answer them.
Hey, it's not a trick question. Is it a new school?
It is sort of a new school which only has
4 years or 3 years.
Yeah.
Oh right, yeah, quite new. Where is it?
It's in Taoyuan.
Navy.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we're only here for a year, so we're not quite actually.
Yeah. I'm here for 3 weeks.
Wait, what? How does that work?
We just recently joined the school.
Yeah, I transferred there.
Oh wow. Oh wow, really? That's like that sounds like a pretty big decision, like just transferring into a new school, right? Is it because it's closer, or what's the draw?
Yeah, it's closer.
Okay. Ariel and Eric is staying quiet. Is it not closer? Did you get a scholarship? What's the reason, Ariel, Eric?
Actually, we're all doing homeschooling before that, so this is like our first school, kind of.
Someone is exposing you, Dylan. Oh, Ethan. I'm guessing Ethan is Yoder as well.
Yeah.
Ethan, I haven't seen you yet, I think. But Ethan, spill the tea.
Okay.
Oh no, Jeff is gonna take a picture. Spill the tea after. Also, who comes up with the name Yoder? Is it like a transcription of something in Chinese?
No, that's
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you just did. You did do
something.
Oh, Yoder. Ah.
I think of real close.
Ah, I get it now. was like some random English word.
I'm gonna pick your nose.
Yay.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, okay, you run away.
Yay. Oh, another one?
Okay, thank you.
We good?
Yay.
Alright. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions about the tournament, about debate, send it to the TSDC email or send it to Jeff. Otherwise, we'll see you at the tournament. Best of luck. Don't freak out. Everything's gonna be fine. Just try to have fun.
Nice.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.